I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. My dad called both of us into his office. The sun was coming through the blinds, lighting up the room where I had spent most of my 20s working late nights, building his company with. I thought it was finally the day he'd tell me I was ready to lead. Instead, he looked at Lily with pride in his eyes and said she'd be taking over the business. I sat there frozen, smiling just enough to hide the sting. For 8 years, I had been there every single day. I knew every client by name, every system, every problem we'd ever fixed. I had missed birthdays, vacations, even relationships, because this company wasn't just a job to me. It was my life. I didn't build it for money. I built it because I believed in what we were doing. Lily was different. She was the kind of person who always found a shortcut. She never liked staying in one place. One month she was in marketing, the next she was trying out event planning. But she was charming, funny, and always seemed to win Dad over with her energy. He said she had a way with people. I guess that was all it took. I sat quietly while he told me how proud he was of her and how I could help her get started. It sounded more like I'd become her assistant than her partner. I could feel my chest tighten, but I didn't argue. There's no point in fighting someone who's already made up their mind. When the meeting ended, Lily hugged me and said, "Don't worry, Ratch. I'll make you proud." Her tone was light, but it felt more like pity. I just nodded and walked out. I didn't cry. Not then. I went back to my small office, shut the door, and sat in silence for a long time. The same walls that once felt like home suddenly felt cold. That evening, Dad came by to thank me for understanding. He said it was time for him to step back and let fresh ideas take over. I wanted to tell him that those ideas were already mine, that the best deals, the smoothest projects, the loyal clients, all came from me. But the words wouldn't come out. I just nodded again and said, "You deserve the break, Dad." When I left that night, I looked around the office one last time. The glow of the computers, the smell of coffee, the sound of phones ringing, it had been my whole world. And now, just like that, it wasn't mine anymore. I drove home with my phone buzzing nonstop, friends and coworkers sending congratulations to Lily. Not one message for me. I didn't blame them. No one knew how much it hurt to watch everything you built get handed to someone who didn't earn it. That night, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to beg for what should have been mine. I'd walk away quietly, but deep down I knew something. When Dad announced that Lily was taking over, I smiled, shook her hand, and even said how proud I was. On the outside, I looked calm and supportive, but inside I felt something break. It was the kind of pain you can't describe, the quiet kind that sits deep in your chest. I had given everything to that business, but I wasn't angry at Lily. I told myself maybe it was time to start my own path. Maybe Dad saw something I couldn't. So, I left without drama. I didn't want to be the bitter sister hanging around, watching someone else take over. I handed in my keys, wished them both luck, and walked out for what I thought was the last time. A week later, I got a job offer at a small project management firm in town. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me peace. The work was steady, the people were kind, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake up worrying about meeting deadlines or making someone else's dream work. But still, every now and then, I'd pass the old office on my drive home. The company name still made my stomach twist. I'd picture Lily sitting in my chair, smiling confidently, probably feeling like she'd earned it all. I tried not to care, but some nights, the thought kept me awake. 2 months into my new job, I overheard a group of former coworkers talking at a local cafe. They were saying that Lily had just signed the company's biggest client, a $10 million deal with a major distribution firm. I froze when I heard that number. That was the deal I had spent nearly a year chasing before I left. I had done the groundwork, made the connections, built the proposal. But it seemed she had sealed it after stepping in. Later that night, my dad called me. His voice was full of excitement, the kind I hadn't heard in years. He said, "Rachel, you should have seen her. She handled the negotiations like a pro. I always knew she had it in her. She's a natural leader." I forced a laugh, said I was happy for them, and hung up quickly before my voice could crack. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. It wasn't jealousy. It was disappointment, the kind that comes when you realize people only value results, not effort. I had done all the unseen work, but in the end, the credit belonged to whoever stood in the spotlight at the right time. For a while, I stopped checking on the company altogether. I focused on my new projects, worked hard, and tried to move forward. Still, part of me couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving too fast over there. Lily had always been good at charming people, but not at managing detail. I didn't know it then, but that big deal, the one that made my dad so proud, would soon become the beginning of her downfall. Didn't. If Lily was really taking charge, the calm wouldn't last long. At first, everything seemed perfect for Lily. She was getting praise from every corner, and Dad couldn't stop talking about how proud he was. The business looked strong from the outside, new clients, new energy, and new leadership. But soon, small things started to show that something wasn't right. People I used to work with started reaching out quietly. One of the senior managers called me one evening. He said Lily had changed the way everything was done. She stopped having team meetings, ignored advice, and only cared about looking good in front of clients. She's not listening to anyone, he told me. It's like she wants to prove she's better than everyone who came before. Lily started treating people poorly. If someone made a small mistake, she would embarrass them in front of others. She fired 2 employees in a single week just because they questioned her decisions. The friendly, respectful workplace we built started turning into a tense environment where no one wanted to speak up. She also started rushing deals to impress clients. Instead of checking every detail, she would promise things the company couldn't deliver. Orders got delayed, shipments went missing, and invoices were sent out wrong. Vendors began complaining about unpaid bills and late delivery. The systems that used to run smoothly started breaking apart. I tried to stay out of it, but it became harder when I heard that 3 longtime employees quit in 1 month. These were people who had stayed even during hard times, loyal to the company and to Dad. Their resignations were a bad sign. When I ran into one of them at the grocery store, he said, "Rachel, it's not the same place anymore. She doesn't care about people, only power." I couldn't ignore it anymore. I called Dad one weekend to check in. I told him what I was hearing and said maybe he should visit the office, just to see things himself. He got defensive right away. "Rachel, you're letting jealousy talk. Lily's doing great. You should be proud of your sister," he said. I sat there holding the phone, stunned. I wasn't jealous, I was worried. I had seen what happened when leaders ignored problems for too long. But no matter how I explained it, he wouldn't listen. In his eyes, Lily could do no wrong. After that call, I decided to stop mentioning it. If he didn't want to believe me, he'd have to see it himself. Still, I couldn't help but feel a deep ache every time I thought about it. I had spent years keeping that company steady, making sure everything worked right, and now it was falling apart because no one cared to notice. Sometimes I'd think about the clients I once worked so hard to win. They trusted the company because of its reliability. Now, those same clients were the ones sending angry emails and pulling back deals. I didn't feel satisfaction or revenge. It happened on a Friday morning. I was at my new office, finishing up a client report, when my phone started buzzing nonstop. The messages came one after another, from old coworkers, a few clients, even a supplier. All of them were saying the same thing. Something had gone terribly wrong at my dad's company. At first, I didn't believe it, but then one message caught my eye. "Rachel, Henderson Freight just pulled out. It's bad. Really bad." My stomach sank. Henderson Freight was the company's biggest client, the one Lily had bragged about signing. Losing them would be a huge blow. I opened my laptop and checked the news. There it was, a short business update. Henderson Freight Corp terminates $10 million contract with Carter Logistics after major delivery failure causes financial loss. I just sat there staring at the screen, reading it again and again. The report said one of the company's deliveries had gone missing, delaying a major distribution for Henderson's biggest partner. The loss was estimated at over $2 million. For a small family-owned logistics company, that kind of hit could destroy everything. A part of me wanted to reach out, to ask Dad if he was okay, but I stopped myself. He had made it clear before, I was no longer part of that world. So, I tried to focus on my own work and pretend I didn't care. But that night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was Dad. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. He hadn't called me in months. When I finally picked up, his voice sounded different, tired, shaky, almost defeated. "Rachel, I need your help," he said quietly. "Lily made a mistake." I didn't say anything at first. I could hear papers shuffling and phones ringing in the background. He kept talking, explaining how the team was in chaos, clients were threatening lawsuits, and Lily wasn't handling it well. She had apparently left the office in tears earlier that day. I listened silently, my heart heavy. The same man who once told me I was jealous was now asking for my help to clean up his favorite daughter's mess. For a second, I almost said yes right away. That old part of me, the one who always wanted to prove myself, was still there. But then another thought hit me hard. He only called when everything was broken. When things were good, I was invisible. I took a deep breath and told him I needed some time to think. He sounded desperate. "Please, Rachel, you're the only one who can fix this." His voice cracked at the end, and that hurt more than I expected. After we hung up, I sat on my couch in silence. I thought about the nights I had spent saving that company before, all the sacrifices I had made, and how easily I had been replaced. Now, the same people who pushed me aside were reaching out for help. I didn't know what to do yet. My heart wanted to help, but my pride told me not to. Still, one thing was clear. The empire Dad had built and handed to Lily was falling apart, and this time, no amount of charm could save it. Only sadness. I could see what was coming, even if no one else could. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the call, about Dad's voice, and about how everything had come full circle. By morning, I decided to go back, not because I wanted to save anyone, but because I couldn't ignore the mess I helped build years ago. The company was still part of me, even if they had pushed me out. When I arrived, the place looked completely different. The bright energy that used to fill the halls was gone. Desks were empty, phones were quiet, and the air felt heavy. The walls still had our old awards hanging, but they looked more like reminders of what we used to be than signs of success. Dad was in his office when I walked in. He looked exhausted, his eyes red, his hands shaking slightly. The confident man I grew up with seemed smaller somehow. He didn't try to pretend everything was fine. He just looked at me and said softly, "Can you fix it?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to remind him of every time he ignored me, every time he chose Lily over me. But instead, I just nodded for him to give me space. I needed to see things for myself before I made any promises. The accounting team handed me the financial reports, and the numbers made my stomach twist. I saw months of poor decisions, overspending, missed deadlines, unpaid vendors, and deals that made no sense. Lily had tried to impress clients by offering huge discounts that the company couldn't afford. It wasn't just bad management, it was reckless. Then I looked at the staff list. So many familiar names were gone. People who had been with us since the early days had either quit or been fired. The few who remained looked tired, like they were just waiting for the end. When I asked where Lily was, one of the supervisors said quietly, she took a break. Went to Florida to clear her head. My jaw clenched. She had run away when things got hard, leaving everyone else to face the damage. I spent the rest of the day walking through each department, listening more than talking. Some employees avoided eye contact, maybe ashamed or scared. Others came up to me and simply said, "We're glad you're back." It wasn't joy, it was relief. That evening, Dad came to my office. He looked uncertain, almost like he was afraid of what I might say. I told him the truth. It's bad, really bad, but it's not impossible. He looked hopeful for the first time that day. Then I added, "I'll only do this if I have full control, no interference, no approvals, no second guessing." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Whatever it takes," he said quietly. As he walked out, I sat there alone, surrounded by the weight of years of work and disappointment. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Fixing what Lily broke meant more than saving a company. It meant facing every hurt I had buried when I walked away. But this time, I wasn't doing it for approval or validation. I was doing it because The first few weeks were the hardest. Every day felt like cleaning up after a storm that never ended. Files were missing, client accounts were a mess, and no one seemed to know who was responsible for what. I started by calling every client myself. Some hung up as soon as they heard the company name. Others stayed on the line long enough to tell me how disappointed they were. I didn't make excuses. I just apologized and promised things would be different. Then I began rebuilding the team. I called back old employees, the ones who had left when Lily took over. A few were hesitant, unsure if things would really change. But slowly, one by one, they came back. Not for me, not for the paycheck, but because they still believed in what we once built together. That gave me strength. Inside the company, I had to make tough choices. I closed departments that weren't bringing in value and reassigned people to roles that matched their skills. For the first time in months, we had direction again. Every day started early and ended late, but there was a new rhythm in the office. Quiet determination instead of chaos. I worked closely with our vendors, clearing overdue payments and rebuilding trust. Some agreed to continue supplying on smaller terms, others needed assurance in writing. It wasn't easy convincing them to give us another chance, but persistence worked. I showed up in person, sat in their offices, and explained the plan. When they saw I was serious, they started coming around. Dad mostly stayed out of the way, just like I had asked. He looked relieved more than proud. Most days, he'd sit quietly in his old chair and watch me work. I think he finally realized what it actually took to keep the business alive all those years. By the second month, things began to stabilize. The staff started smiling again, small bonuses returned, and clients stopped threatening to leave. I wasn't chasing perfection. I was trying to bring back trust. Then, one morning, I received an email from Henderson Freight. They had heard about the changes and wanted to meet. I couldn't believe it. After everything that happened, I didn't expect them to even consider us again. When we met, their team was polite but cautious. I was honest with them about what went wrong and explained every step we had taken to fix it. I didn't sugarcoat anything. A week later, they agreed to give us a small contract. Nothing close to the original deal, but enough to prove we were capable again. It was the break we needed. When the first delivery went perfectly, their operations manager sent me a simple message. "This feels like the Carter logistics we used to know." I wanted to tell Dad about it right away. I expected him to smile or say he was proud. But when I told him, he just nodded and said, That's good. No excitement, no emotion. I realized then that I wasn't doing this for his approval anymore. I was doing it for myself, and for the people who stayed through the worst days, believing that one day we could bring the company back to life. Refused to let something I built die because of someone else's mistakes. About a week after Henderson Freight came back, the company started getting attention again. Clients were happy, employees were motivated, and it finally felt like the worst days were behind us. For the first time in years, there was hope. Then one morning, I walked into the office and saw everyone gathered around the break room table, looking at a magazine. Someone handed me a copy, smiling. "You made it," they said. It was the Cleveland Business Review, a local magazine that often featured successful companies. Across the front cover was a big headline, "The Carter Family's Comeback Story." There was a full-page photo of Dad standing proudly next to Lily, both smiling, shaking hands like business partners. My stomach dropped. I flipped through the pages, searching for my name. Nothing. Not one word about me or the work I had done to bring the company back from collapse. The article told a perfect story, how Lily, after a temporary setback, helped rebuild the business alongside her father. It described their strong leadership, their family vision, and their unbreakable bond. I could barely finish reading it. The people who wrote that article didn't even know the truth, and Dad had clearly done nothing to correct them. I felt a mix of anger and disappointment. I didn't want fame or recognition, but seeing Lily take credit for something she had abandoned, it burned. She hadn't even been around for months. She was still in Florida when I was working 16-hour days to save everything she broke. I went straight to Dad's office, magazine in hand. He looked up from his desk, surprised to see me so upset. I placed it in front of him and asked, "Why is my name not anywhere in this? You know who rebuilt this company?" He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Rachel, it's just a magazine. They wanted a family angle. Don't make this about ego." His words hit harder than I expected. I wasn't looking for praise. I just wanted honesty. I stared at him, trying to find even a small trace of guilt or recognition, but there was none. He genuinely didn't think he'd done anything wrong. I said quietly, "You don't even realize what you're doing, do you? You'll never see me as the person who built this, only the one who fixes it when your favorite messes it up." He stayed silent. That silence told me everything I needed to know. No apology, no gratitude, just indifference. I walked out of his office that day and didn't look back. For the rest of the afternoon, I went through my tasks like a machine, emails, calls, reports, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. When everyone left for the day, I sat alone in my office, looking at the magazine again. I thought about how much effort I had given, how much of myself I had poured into saving something that was never really mine. That night, as I drove home, I made another silent promise, just like the one I made years ago when Dad first gave the company to Lily. This time, it wasn't about walking away in pain. It was about walking away with purpose. I realized then that I didn't need their approval to prove my worth. I had already done that through my actions. After that day with the magazine, something inside me changed completely. I stopped hoping my dad would ever see me for who I was. I kept showing up to work, but my focus shifted. I wasn't rebuilding for him anymore. I was planning my own future quietly, carefully, without making a scene. When I first returned to the company months earlier, I had handled all the legal restructuring to keep things running. Dad had trusted me completely with the paperwork, signing every document I placed in front of him. He never asked questions. He was just desperate to keep the company alive. I made sure everything was legal and transparent, but I also made one small adjustment that most people would have overlooked. I turned my position into a 49% ownership stake. It wasn't a secret in the sense of deceit. It was all documented, but no one really paid attention. Dad thought I was just formalizing roles. I knew someday he might regret overlooking it, but at that time, I just wanted a fair share of what I had rebuilt. As the months passed, the business became strong again. The numbers were better than before. Clients trusted us, the staff was stable, and cash flow was back on track. We were finally in a place of strength. Everyone thought I'd be happy, but I wasn't. The success felt hollow because I knew I couldn't stay under the same roof with people who only valued me when they needed saving. That's when an investment firm reached out. They had noticed the turnaround and wanted to buy a large stake in the company. They offered a number that made me stop and stare. It was more money than I had ever imagined earning in my lifetime. I thought about it for days, trying to decide what to do. Then one morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized I was done being the person who always stayed behind fixing things. So I called the firm back and started the process. It was quiet and professional. Lawyers handled everything. I didn't breathe a word to anyone at the company. Not Dad, not the staff, no one. When the deal was finalized, the funds hit my account, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The next morning, I went to the office for the last time. I packed my things slowly, a few photos, some books, and a coffee mug I'd kept since the early days. I didn't leave a note or make a speech. I just handed my access card to the receptionist and walked out. Dad didn't find out until a week later when the new investors called him to arrange a meeting. By then, I was already gone. I had no interest in arguments or explanations. There were no shouting matches, no slammed doors, just silence. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. Selling my share wasn't revenge in the loud sense. It was quiet, deliberate, and final. I had taken back my power in the simplest way possible, by walking away with everything I had earned. For the first time in years, I felt free. They could have the spotlight. I was finally done chasing it. A few weeks passed before my phone rang one morning. I saw my dad's name on the screen, and I already knew what was coming. His voice was sharp, filled with disbelief and anger. "You sold the company?" he shouted before I could even say hello. I took a deep breath and answered quietly, "No, Dad. I sold my part. The part one earned, the part you signed for." For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard him sigh, long, heavy, tired. It wasn't the sigh of a man who had lost control of a company. It was the sound of someone realizing too late what they had taken for granted. I didn't try to explain more. There was nothing left to say. For years, I had fought to be seen, to be appreciated, to prove I was more than just the helper or the backup. Now, I didn't need to. After that call, I didn't hear from him for a while. The silence didn't hurt like I thought it would. In fact, it felt like peace. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible for holding everything together. I didn't have to worry about the company's reputation or the next crisis. I didn't have to earn anyone's approval. The world moved on, and so did I. I rented a small office space and began consulting for other businesses that were struggling the way ours once did. It felt strange at first, working for myself, not under my father's name, not in anyone's shadow. But with every small success, I started to feel proud again. I wasn't rebuilding for someone else this time. I was building something that was fully mine. Sometimes, I'd hear small updates about the company. The new investors had restructured it further, brought in new leadership, and changed a few policies. I didn't feel angry or nostalgic. I simply wished them well and turned back to my own work. Dad eventually called again, but this time his tone was softer. He didn't ask for anything. He just said, "You did what you had to do." I could tell he didn't fully understand it, but at least he accepted it. That was enough. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time, thinking about how things had come full circle. I realized revenge doesn't always mean hurting someone back. Sometimes it means stepping away without bitterness, knowing you've done your part and no longer need their validation. All those years I spent trying to fix things, trying to prove myself, had finally led me to this point, a calm, unshakable certainty that I was enough. I didn't need applause, headlines, or anyone's permission to move forward. In the end, I hadn't just sold my share of a company. I had freed myself from years of quiet disappointment. And in that freedom, I found something far more valuable than money. Months passed, and life slowly found a new rhythm. The noise, the tension, and the bitterness from everything that happened started to fade. I spent those months thinking about what I really wanted, not what my dad expected, not what the family thought was right, but what would make me feel proud again. That's when I decided to open my own consulting firm. I called it Carter Strategies. The name was a quiet reminder of where I came from, but this time, it was fully mine. I started small. Just me, a rented desk, and a laptop. I reached out to local family-owned businesses that were struggling, just like ours once had. Most of them had the same problems. Too much pride, favoritism, no communication, and poor structure. I helped them rebuild, teaching them how to separate family from business, how to make decisions based on skill, not emotion. Every time I helped a team find balance again, I felt like I was rewriting my own past, piece by piece. The work wasn't easy, but it was deeply fulfilling. There were no shouting matches, no silent resentment, no need to prove myself to anyone. Just honest work and real results. The first time one of my clients doubled their profits after following my strategies, I cried, not because of the money, but because I finally saw the value of what I had learned through all the pain. One afternoon, as I was going through some emails, I saw a name that made me pause. It was from Ethan, one of the longtime employees who had worked under my father's company. He had been one of the few who stood by me even when things fell apart. His message was simple. "Rachel, the company isn't the same without you. You were the reason most of us stayed as long as we did." I stared at those words for a while, a small smile forming on my face. For years, I had wondered if my efforts ever really mattered. That message was my answer. I didn't need public recognition or a magazine cover. This quiet acknowledgement from someone who had seen the truth up close meant more than any title ever could. Later that evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with new client messages, but I didn't rush to answer. For the first time in a long time, I was content, completely at peace with how everything had turned out. Dad had given my sister the business, but in the end, life gave me something far more valuable. It gave me freedom, the freedom to create, to lead, to grow without being overshadowed. I realized then that sometimes losing what you thought was your destiny is actually the universe's way of giving you a clean slate. I didn't just survive my father's choice. I turned it into the foundation of something new, something real. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered to myself, this is mine. Peace, my worth, and my own name standing on its own.